Again, these players, the only ones really running their decks in this tournament. We saw a lot of Jeskai tokens, a lot of Sultai Reanimator strategies, the lone Mardu and Temur advocates in the room.
Yeah, and this is a tough round for the Nerd Rage gaming team of Ketter and Lisette, both of them working together for the event, playing side by side to see if they can make it into Legacy.
But again, they get through this, still an opportunity to win the whole thing.
All right, so Kent starts out on a temple, Jeff with a fetch land. We're going to have some development at the beginning of the game. Just of mana. And first play will be Jeff. It'll be a Sylvan Carry added. Now, I want to touch a bit. We talked about how Kent's Mardu deck is not just a straight Mardu deck. You said it was red, white, splashing, crackling Doom. So normally when I think about these decks, I expect to see a lot more black style cards. You know, perhaps something like Hero's Downfall, Mardu Charm, Butcher of the Horde. What is Kent on instead? Well,
the big creature in his deck, I guess the biggest, most notable deviation is Ash Cloud Phoenix that he's playing in lieu of Butcher of the Horde. And if he's expecting a lot of mid-range matchups, I think that's a reasonable choice because Butcher of the Horde is very powerful, very splashy, but when your opponent has a removal spell, that's the end of business. You know, life goes on from there. Ash Cloud Phoenix is much more durable against decks that are packing a lot of spot removal, and if Kent was anticipating that kind of metagame, it makes some sense. We've seen people do that before. Butcher of the Horde has not been included in every single Mardu list I've seen.
Well, Jeff can continue mana ramping here. He has on double 2-drop on turn 4. That's going to be Heir of the Wilds and Rattleclaw Mystic next to each other. Rabblemaster was the play from Ketter, however.
And this is why I really don't like the matchup game 1 from Jeff's side. It's trivial for Kent to break up a lot of the action between Chain of the Rocks and Crackling Doom.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff has a lot of creatures, you know, these 2 power things that standalone aren't all that impressive.
And you're seeing that on display right now, as this has the makings of an unchecked Rabblemaster game.
Yeah, it is Chain to the Rocks takes care of of the Rattleclaw Mystic. Lightning Strike takes down Heir of the Wilds, and then Goblin Rabblemaster and his 2 goblins will swing in for 6 points of damage, dropping Hoogland down to 13. And no 4th land over from Hoogland. He makes a second Sylvan Carry added, so the Rabblemaster attacks will continue unchecked here.
In his hand of Temur Charm, uncastable and not that helpful. Stormbreath Dragon. Best case scenario is trading with the Rabblemaster next turn, so Jeff is in a lot of trouble.
All right, Rabblemaster making it a 3rd token this time, swinging in. He is a 5/2, his 3 1/1s join the attack with him. Potential 6 damage coming across between the Rabblemaster and one of the tokens. Jeff does take 6. He's down to 7. And so the thing about Temur, what I'm wondering is, are there cards in his main deck? You know, for Hoogland, can he Anger of the Gods, or what is his answer to all these, to this kind of attack? I mean, Ketter making Hordling Outburst, 3 more goblins.
Jeff has some cards to fight against a sea of small creatures, a couple of removal spells, 3 copies of Pelucranos. If he gets out on the front foot, that could be really powerful. But game 1, he's not really set up to beat that kind of draw unless he has some really specific cards.
And with that, Ketter takes down game 1. Jeff with no answer there is going to go ahead and scoop it as the players move to sideboarding right now.
So Jeff's side, we'll see what he has here. He said that he likes the matchup more for him post-board. 2 copies of Reclamation Sage, a 2nd copy of Dig Through Time, 3 copies of Disdainful Stroke, Force Away, Stoke the Flames, Stubborn Denial, 3 copies of Anger of the Gods, and an Arc Lightning. The 3 copies of Anger of the Gods really stand out here because Kent's deck is not the most robust against it. As we mentioned before, Butcher of the Horde not in the list, Ash Cloud Phoenix in the list. Usually that makes you better against removal, but much, much worse against Anger of the Gods, and he's playing Goblin Rabblemaster and Seeker of the Way to boot. So I think that's a big upgrade. I think even some of the tempo spells, some of these bounce spells, the Stoke the Flames, they can be good for Jeff here too. I think the 2 copies of Reclamation Sage will also come in because I think 4 copies of Chain of the Rocks are among Kent's better cards in the matchup. So even though it's a little bit narrow, I like bringing them in here.
All right, well, as we continue our 2014 Players' Championship, we're taking a look ahead to 2015. One thing that we can talk about is Next Level Magic. This is the book by the innovator Patrick Chapin, winner of a Pro Tour here in 2014. He has taken his book to the next level and updating it for the 2015 edition you see there on the screen. It is now available in paperback and ebook. If you want to learn more, go to starcitygames.com/NLM.
So this is not an entirely new book. A lot of it is updated content and updated examples, but the paperback format form of this has been sold out for a very long time, and we know that there's a lot of people out there who have been really interested in the updates. That's available now on StarCityGames.com/NLM, both in PDF and paperback form.
All right, we'll bring you back into the match. So Jeff Hoogland does have Arc Lightning. He does have Anger of the Gods. He can answer an unchecked, or he can answer Rabblemaster in a much more clean way post-board, you'd say.
Yes, I think that he does make substantial upgrades here. Kent's deck, much more aggressive than the typical Mardu list, but Anger of the Gods is going to be much better for Jeff here than it otherwise would be.
Yeah, on Ketter's side of the board, he doesn't have as many weapons here as you would otherwise look for in the sideboard. A lot of his best cards here are in the main deck. Does have copies of cards like Banishing Light here to deal with some of the 4 and 5 drops that you might expect out of a team or mid-range deck. An additional copy of Crackling Doom and perhaps a copy of Utter End just to take care of large creatures. But a lot of his game is in the main.
Exactly. The spot removal, I think, is likely to come in here, but it's worth noting that it's not as good against Jeff as it might appear on the surface. Most of what Jeff brings to the table is either cheap or it has protection from white and Stormbreath Dragon. So cards like Utter End really only match up very well against Polukranos. That said, I think Kent wants to overload on as much removal as possible, and he's likely to bring in that stuff even though it's not spectacular against Jeff's deck. It's merely fine.
Yeah, it is a good point. When you think that Jeff's larger creatures are cards like Savage Knuckleblade and Stormbreath Dragon, it can be really dangerous to bring in a lot of removal, especially if it's white removal.
It'll still probably be fine, but Kent can get into spots where either he's trading a lot more mana than the threat that Jeff deployed, or he has the wrong removal spell in his hand for the threat that Jeff's bringing to the table.
Ketter up a game. Remember, the winner of this will go on to the Legacy matches in the afternoon. This is an elimination match here between the two players.
There is one copy of Sarkhan the Dragon Speaker in Kent's sideboard. I like that a lot in this matchup too, because it can be a lot of pressure, and Jeff is bringing a lot of expensive 4 toughness creatures to the table. So even just as a removal spell, it's excellent, and there's some times where Jeff's going to really struggle to answer it.
Jeff on the play for game 2, and we are underway. He leads off on Temple of Epiphany. So last game was pretty quickly answered by a Rabblemaster backed up by removal spells on Kent's side. Now, what is Hoogland looking for in this game? I mean, that seemed really problematic for him. How does the Jeff Hoogland game go?
I think 4 toughness creatures into Anger of the Gods. That's the recipe he wants post-board.
Nomad Outpost from Ketter. So we pass back to Jeff. His deck full of 2-drops. We'll see but he has none of them this turn as he actually just passes back into Kent.
Well, there is the question of how many 2-drops does he remove when he goes to the Anger of the Gods package? You know, Caryatid, Heir of the Wilds, they don't really play that well alongside Anger of the Gods. Rattleclaw, Mystic as well. So it wouldn't surprise me if Jeff took out a lot of his 2-drops.
Seeker of the Way on turn 2 for Ketter. We'll go back to Hoogland. See what he has for this one. You see he has a copy of Stubborn Denial in his hand, as well as Polukranos. Does have Anger of the Gods, just has to decide how much value he wants to try to get off it. Will Kent play into something like, will he play into it with something like Hordling Outburst, or does Jeff just want to 1-for-1 the card? And he looks like he's going to go for a move, cracking 2 fetch lands. And it'll be for Savage Knuckleblade.
So Jeff paused for a while here before doing this, which to me, if I'm in Kent's spot, I think the odds that Jeff has Anger of the Gods in hand are higher than they otherwise would be. Because this seems like a really powerful opening here. What else could Jeff be contemplating?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the best turn 3 plays for his deck.
It's one of the main incentives to play this deck in the first place.
Yeah, Savage Knuckleblade's certainly one of the more powerful cards from Khans of Tarkir, probably held back by its mana cost more than anything else.
And the fact that it's just not robust against spot removal. Unlike something like Siege Rhino, Sidisi, some of the other splashier cards we see, where your opponent has a removal spell, that's fine. Even Butcher the Horde didn't make Kent's deck list for the same reason. Savage Knuckleblade has the same problem.
Well, Crackling Doom will take care of the Knuckleblade, and Seeker of the Way will swing in for 3 damage. So some early beats on Ketter's side. Anger of the Gods will clean up the boards on Jeff's side, but he does not have a 4th land, so we'll be back onto Ketter. So he will scry and try to find his way into some of his later drops here. But at the very least, he'll get Rabblemaster yet again.
And his mana base right now does not allow him to cast Courser, and even if he rips a 4th land, there's no guarantee he can unload something like Polukranos. It looks like he's just tapping.
And Jeff, once again, with no answer to Goblin Rabblemaster, will That'll be it. So Kent Ketter 2-0 in quick fashion wins the match over Jeff Hoogland. Ketter will get to play Legacy this afternoon, but for Jeff Hoogland from Bloomington, Illinois, this is going to be the end of the road for him.
Clearly a very frustrating tournament for him there. You see, I mean, that's a spot where I've seen Jeff play in opens plenty of times. I think he's going to play it out there. I think he could have even cast a Reclamation Sage that was in his hand. Maybe he can block, who knows? But I think that overall just very frustrating, and Jeff just wants to call it a day.